All right, welcome back everybody. If this is your first time to the channel, welcome to Notes to Fret, where we are all about turning theory into riffs. This is part one of a three-part series on intervals, which we will be diving into every aspect of intervals that are possibly imagined. From here, the one thing that I do want to bring up is as we move through this video, it's going to be beneficial if you're familiar with at least the major scale, right? So if the term whole step, half step, whole step, half step isn't making a lot of sense to you right now, I encourage you to go take a look at the video on the major scale and then come back to this one. You'll just get more out of it. As far as the intervals are concerned, you'll get plenty out of this video. There's no prereq from that perspective, but when we do dive into how they relate to scales, it'll just be helpful, right? So I just want to put that out at the beginning of the video, make sure I don't take up anyone's time unnecessarily. But with that being said, what we are going to be talking about with intervals is intervals from a guitarist perspective. So we're going to be using terms of intervals as they directly relate to fretboards, right? So, you know, we've spoken about the semitone. That sounds obnoxious. So guitarists, we use the term one fret. We'll be doing the same kind of construction here as we work through the intervals. One thing I do want to bring up is intervals are deceptively simple when you first start, and then they turn on you very, very quickly, and can seem like things just, go haywire. They're not, and it just takes, it takes putting a couple of notions aside for just a little bit, and we'll get to them. So I just wanted to bring that up. As we're going through these intervals, we're going to be looking at it from the fretboard over here on the left side of the screen. So again, it's gonna start off really simple, and it's gonna seemingly get complex. Intervals are just one of those things I know a lot of guitarists struggle with, because I know I struggled with it an incredible amount when I first started off with this stuff. But we'll come back to the more complex stuff in later videos. But for now, there's just going to be a couple of areas for intervals that you can just kind of take at face value for the time being, and we'll get to those. So I just wanted to bring that up. But the first interval that I want to talk about, if we look up towards the upper right hand or upper left hand corner of our screen, we kind of come to our first fret. And more than just coming up to our first fret, we've moved up, let's say, one fret. Let's say you were playing any open string. It doesn't matter. Your E, your A, your D, your G, B, E, it doesn't matter. And you moved up one fret, right? So let's say you went from your low E, and then you moved your index finger onto the very first fret. So you've moved up one fret, or one semitone. What you've done is you've moved into a second. Now, what kind of second? Well, if you've only moved up one fret, that is a minor. And so you've moved up into the second, and it's a minor, and we just call that our minor second. So if you go from C to C sharp, or you go from A to A sharp, or you go from E to F, that's just one fret. So that would be, you just moved up a minor second. You moved up one fret, okay? Now, when you move up two frets, in this case, right, we're moving into the second fret on our fretboard, but it's really two frets from anything, right? So here we've moved, let's say, from our open E, and we moved up two frets to our F sharp, right? Well, that's still a second, but that's a major second, and that is exactly what we call this interval, is a major second. So if you're on A and you move up two frets, you've gone from A to B, and that means that B is a major second of A, okay? Moving along, we move three frets, and here we move into a third. What kind of third? This is a minor third, and that's exactly what we call this, our minor third. So if you move up 3 frets, right? So let's say you're at A, and you move up 3 frets, you move into A sharp, B, C. That means C is a minor third from A, okay? We're just looking at this from kind of our open strings perspective, right? So if we're on our A string, right, our fifth string, and we move up 3 frets, we'll wind up on an A, or I'm sorry, we'll wind up on a C. And so we have a minor third. Now there's a lot of intervals in here that you're gonna kind of be looking at them and wondering how important they are. I will say this, probably the most important interval for your entire musical, practice and career is going to be the third. Regardless if it's the major or the minor third, the third is the most important interval. And the next area that we look at is if we move up 4 frets, that's still a third, but what type of third is it? It's a major, and we call that our major third. So moving up 3 or 4 frets, or 3 to 4 semitones, they both mean exactly the same thing. The major and the minor third are going to be the most important interval that you're ever gonna learn. So here, the major and the minor third, those two, remember them. 3 frets and 4 frets. Just those are the two. The major and the minor second and everything else that we move on, absolutely important, but definitely the third, regardless, major or minor. It's a major third or minor third, know those two. But now we're kind of looking at this, and as guitarists, we are starting to see a pattern, right? We've got our seconds and our thirds, and they go from minor, major, right? Kind of see that. And so now we move into our next degree, right? We have a second degree, third degree. Now we move into our 4th degree, right? If we move up 5 frets, now we have a 4th, and you might be thinking, okay, well that must be minor 4th. It's not. It's a perfect, and we call this the perfect 4th. And this is where things can start to, take a little bit of a turn. I would like in this video, if this is new to you, rather than reading in too terribly much right now to the perfect and how it kind of breaks that pattern, just take it at face value for the time being. We'll get more into it, but for the time being, just realize that 5 frets is a perfect 4th. And if you've watched the video on the circle of fifths and the circle of fourths, when we go down to the left side and we're talking about the left side of the circle being the circle of fourths, again, this is why, right? So we're kind of back putting this together. But for now, I know that it breaks the pattern from minor, major. Just 5 frets is a perfect 4th. Next, we wind up on our 6th fret. And if we think about the 6th fret for a moment, we realize that it is directly in between the open string and our 12th fret, which we know is the octave. Right? The octave seems to be one of those intervals all guitarists know. So we're on our 6th fret, and it is directly in between the open string and our 12th fret. So naturally, it's going to have a little uniqueness to it, and it is. It's called the tritone. So now all of a sudden, that second minor and major, and the thirds minor and major. Now we have perfects and tritones. Now things seemingly look kind of weird, and just to make things even worse, this tritone can have probably 3 or 4 different titles to it, if you will. We'll get into that, but for now, if you just recognize that the 6th fret, 6 frets up, 6 semitones up from any note is the tritone, okay? And for the time being, it's going to get you moving along just fine, right? It's going to put that confusion behind you. 5 frets is a perfect 4th. 6 frets is the tritone. So naturally now we're going to move into the 7th fret, and now we re-engage with our 5th degree, right? Because a major and a minor second is the 2nd degree. A major and a minor third is 3rd degree. Perfect 4th is a 4th degree. Tritone is just its own little beast. And then when we move up 7 frets, we're at the 5th degree. But once again, this is a perfect, and we call this the perfect 5th. Now again, this might look kind of strange in here, but at this midway section, or this midway point, the 5, 6, and 7 frets, there's just, it's kind of a little in between. So that's why these 3 intervals look confusing. But if you just take them at face value for the time being, 5 frets is a perfect 4th, 6 frets is a tritone, 7 frets is a perfect 5th. It will help alleviate a lot of confusion. We'll get into this middle area and iron it all out. But for now, it's going to just help you look at it as perfect 4ths and perfect 5ths. So now we move into our 8th fret, right? Or 8 semitones up, or 8 frets up. And now we start getting back into something that looks a little bit more normal. We're at our 6th degree, but what kind of interval is 8 frets? Well, it's a minor, and we call that our minor 6th. And now you can start to see we get back into a little bit of our normalcy, if you will. And when we move up 9 frets, we're still at our 6th degree, but now we're at our major. And so therefore, this is our major 6th. And again, it doesn't have to be from an open string to your 9th fret. It can be wherever you are, anywhere on the fretboard. If you move up 9 frets, wherever you wind up from whatever note you started, if you move up 9 frets, you will be at the major 6th, right? But I'm just showing you from the open string, so it's just a little bit more, clearly defined. And here we move into the 10th fret, and we now move into the 7th degree, and this will make sense in a minute if you're not familiar with the scales, but the numbers above the notes in the scale are the degrees. We'll look at them, but that's where I'm talking about the 6th degree and the 7th degree, and we'll look at that in just a minute. But here, if we move up 10 frets, 10 semitones, we're on the 7th. We start with the minor, so therefore we have a minor 7th. And when we move up 11 frets, we're still in the 7th degree, but it's major now, and so therefore we have a major 7th. Now, most of you are probably looking at the very next fret towards the bottom with the 2 dots, and thinking that's the 12th fret. You know for a fact, you've got that one nailed. That is an octave, and you are 100% correct. There's no question about it. The next fret here is absolutely called the octave. That said, it is also called something else, and technically it's our 8th degree, and it becomes a perfect. So therefore, the octave can also be called the perfect 8th. Now I will say this, we will never refer to this as the perfect 8th. It is referred to as an octave, period, end of story. I am going to leave this perfect 8th in here just for a moment so I can clarify a couple of things within the scales that we've already spoken about. So I'm going to leave the perfect 8th in here for just a minute, but just know that you will never call this a perfect 8th. This is an octave. Just realize that it's an octave, but I do want to clarify something with just a couple points. So anyways, this 8th, right? That's the 8th degree, and we'll get into kind of why I have this here in a moment. But this is just cleaned up a little bit, right? We have our minor 2nd, our major 2nd, our minor 3rd, our major 3rd, our perfect 4th, tritone, perfect 5th, minor 6th, major 6th, minor 7th, major 7th, perfect 8th, otherwise known as the octave. And again, I just wanted to kind of clean it up. And now I want to reference this as it relates to our major scale. And I'm just going to use C major again so we don't have to deal with sharps or flats, and it'll just be an easier conversation. Now, as we're looking at this, we've seen this before, right? The whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step. And we start and we stop the scale on the same note. And now, if you'll notice at the top of the scale, we have our first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh degrees. Okay? Our C is our first degree, our D is our second degree, and that corresponds to our seconds. We don't know if they're major or minor yet. We'll look at that. But that's what I meant by degrees, right? The first note is the first degree, the second note, second degree, so on and so forth. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh degree, right? So the one interval that I want to talk about real quick is if you haven't moved up or down a fret, and let's say you're just playing, you're jamming on a G, right? You're just dun 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 dun, and that G is just ringing out. You're not moving up or down. You're just G. You haven't moved anywhere. You 0 frets. That also has a name. The non-motion in intervals has a name, and it's called the perfect unison. You're not moving. So I just wanted to bring that up. You may or may not hear somebody refer to a perfect unison at some point, but that's your first degree in your scale. It's called the perfect unison. So we're going to kind of erase that, but you get the idea, okay? So now what we do need to look at is our second degree. And our second degree, being the D, means it is either a minor or a major. We don't know which one yet, but we do know it's a second. We just don't know which one. Same thing with E. It's our third degree, so we know it's a major or minor third, but we don't know which one yet. And our fourth, again, for now, just the fourth is a perfect fourth. And I'll prove it to you in a minute, but for now, the fourth is a perfect fourth. And the fifth is going to be a perfect fifth. There's no tritone to worry about within the major scale. And then we have our sixth degree. And so we know that it's going to be a major or a minor. We don't know which one yet. And then we have our seventh degree. And it's going to be a minor or a major. Again, we don't know which one yet. And if you remember from the video, if you've watched it, I talked a lot about having that 8 above the last note. This is why. It's really the perfect 8. And this is where the 8 comes from, right? So when you see me writing out scales and I have this last degree, right? We've moved up an octave, but I have that 8 above it. It's because technically it's the 8th degree, and technically an octave is, right? We spoke about it. It's the perfect 8th. And that 8 corresponds to the 8th of the perfect 8th. But we're guitarists and we are the cool kids. And we refer to this as the octave. It's that simple. So anyways, just wanted to kind of clarify that. So we have the major scale here, but we're looking at this interval from C to D, our first interval, right? What is the second? Well, we have a whole step, and we know that a whole step is 2 frets. Well, if we look back over at the fretboard, if we have 2 frets, we know that it's a major second. And so therefore, D is the major second of C major. Now, one thing I want to just bring up really quick is the way that you can articulate D being the major second. People say different terms, right? D is the major second of C. D is the major second of the C major scale. D is a major second. There's lots of different, phrasing that people will use to describe this. So as I'm printing out on these slides, I'm going to use as much variation as I can, just so you'll hear some of the different kind of wording that people put together to describe these intervals. So, for this one, I'm just saying D is the second, is the major second of C major. You could have just as easily have said D is the major second of C. So I just wanted to kind of point that out to you. But regardless, D is a major second, and we know why, because it's 2 frets up from C. Now, the next one we're going to look at is E. Well, that's a whole step up from D. So therefore, that's 2 more frets. Therefore, when we add these up, we get 4 frets, which is a major third. Therefore, E is the major third of C major. Okay? And likewise, when we move to look at the F, well, the F is a half step, and that's 1 fret away from E. So again, we add them up, right? 2, 4, 5. And what do we get when we get 5? As promised, we have the perfect fourth, right? So F is a perfect fourth up from C. And this is what I was saying as I'm going to kind of vary the statements that I use, but you get the idea. So with that, we need to look at the next degree, which is our G. And from F to G is a whole step, which is 2 additional frets. And so here, when we add them up, we wind up with 7. And what do we know? If we move up 7 frets, we have the perfect fifth, again, as promised. So within the major scale, we're dealing with perfect fifths and perfect fourths, so no problem. And G is the perfect fifth of C. And we just kind of move through this, right? And now we're moving into A, which again is a whole step. So we add everything up, and once again, we're going to move right now we have 9 frets. We know that if we have 9 frets or 9 semitones, we have a major 6. So therefore, A is a major 6th from C. Okay? Now, the one thing I do want to point out here is this is where intervals and keys can get a little confusing. Well, we all know that A minor is the relative minor of C. But here when we're looking at intervals, we're saying that A is a major 6th from C. And you may be thinking, well, wouldn't it make sense that if A is the relative minor of C, that in the scale, it should be a minor 6th? That's not really what we're talking about when we're talking about intervals in the scale. What we're talking about here when we're looking at intervals is a distance, right? So the distance from from C to D, the distance was 2 frets, which made it a major second. And when we're looking at our A, what's the distance from C? Well, that's where we have 9 frets. It's not about the chord construction yet. And when we talk about the circle of fifths, that's what we're really talking about is chord construction, right? So we have the C major, the F major, the G major, the D minor, the E minor, and the A minor in the key of C. That A minor is a chord, right? So it's not a degree in a scale. The A minor is a chord, and it will make more sense when we start constructing chords. But for now, realize that all we're talking about is the distance between notes. And since the distance between C and A is 9 frets, that's why we are getting a major 6th. So just kind of keep that in mind, okay? I know it can seem confusing right now, but it's that nature of kind of combining the scale with the structure of chords. So anyways, next we're going to move into the B, and there, once again, we have 2 frets. So again, when we add all of these up, we wind up with 11, right? And what do we get when we move up 11 frets? Here, we get the major 7th. And so therefore, B is a major 7th above C. And now just to finish it off, right, when we come into our perfect 8th, we go from B to C. That's 1, it's a semitone, 1 fret. And so we add all those up and we have our octave. Okay? And that's pretty much about it. What I do want to do just really quick, I feel like I'd be remiss if I didn't go through the minor scale as well. I'll go through this one a little bit quicker. And again, it's just A minor scale. It's the A minor scale, okay? And we have the whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, whole step. So again, we start and stop on A. We have our degrees above each one of the notes in the scale. And we have our unison. We have our second, and we don't know if it's a minor or major yet. We have our third. We don't know if it's minor or major yet. A fourth, it's going to be a perfect fourth, I'll tell you that. Fifth, and that's also going to be a perfect fifth. But sixth, right, we don't know if it's going to be major or minor yet. Seventh, we don't know if it's going to be major or minor yet. And then, obviously we come out to our perfect 8th, and we know that's going to be a octave up. So anyways, with that being said, even though this is an eighth, right? Cool kids, guitar players, we call it an octave. So when we look at A to B, right? That's a whole step. So you have 2 frets. That means B is 2 frets up from A, meaning B is the major second of A, of the A minor scale, of A minor, right? Again, just using different kind of phrasing here. Next, we look at C. And here we have a half step, or 1 fret, right? A semitone. So when we add those up, right, we wind up with 3. And we know that when we hit 3 frets away, we wind up with the minor third. And C is the minor third of A. Okay? Again, it's just the distance. So now we just move into D, and we just keep doing this, right? And so now we have D, and now we have 5 frets up, and as promised, right? That's just your perfect fourth. So D is a perfect fourth up from A. Next, we move into E, and we have a whole step up from D. So that's 2 more frets. So again, when we add all of this up, we wind up with 7 frets, and we know that 7 frets is a perfect fifth, again, as promised. E is the perfect fifth of A. Now from E to F, that's just 1 fret up, right? Semitone. And so now we've just moved up, and now we have 8 frets. And so therefore, F is the minor sixth. Right? And that's it. We'll finish it off going, well, 1 more, but go to G, we have 2 more frets. And so here we have 10. So when we add all those up, right, that's how we're coming up with 10. And we know when we've moved up 10 frets, we have a minor 7th. Therefore, G is the minor 7th of A. And once again, now we're just to finish it off, going to A, that's 2 more frets up. And therefore, we know when we add all these up, we have our 12 frets or the octave. Okay? So that's the first introduction. That's the first part. That's the introduction to intervals. Let me know down in the comments if you have any questions. Like I said, intervals are one of those things that come across seemingly simple at first, and then all of a sudden they can take a weird turn and become, they can seemingly become complex. They're really straightforward. We'll dive into them in the other videos, but again, this is an introduction. Just keep the perfect fourth, tritone, perfect fifth in your mind of the 5, 6, 7 fret distance, and you'll get this much more quickly. But we'll deal with this later. But for now, that goes through our major and our minor scales. We understand how the intervals are connected to them, and in the next video, we'll dive into some of the more specifics. All right, take care, everybody.